Hi everybody, I'm Andy Murray from WhatCulture.com.
And coming to you live from a top-secret WhatCulture filming location buried deep beneath the Earth's crust, I'm Adam Cleary from WhatCulture.com, and coming up for you today, some sad news for Adam Wilborn, Otis, and not really anybody else, as well as news of a top-secret meeting for a WWE star.
I'm going to tell you a potential spoiler for the WWE Money in the Bank cash-in plans, and on top of that, we've got some major title changes coming out of Hell in a Cell. This is the news. Usual disclaimer, I can't do what Adam Wilborn does, man. Don't ask me to do that. Let's kick things off by talking Hell in a Cell.
What can't you do?
Yeah, and I can't do anything that man can do. He's very talented. Hell in a Cell. Title changes all over the place. By all over the place, I mean 2, but there was only like 3 matches on the pay-per-view, so you know. The first title change on last night's show, Sasha Banks is the SmackDown Women's Champion. She defeated Bayley in a Hell in a Cell match that I think was at least on par with the classics they had down in NXT. This thing absolutely ripped. It was very, very creative, but the title changes the story coming out of it. I'm not going to sit here and give you a play-by-play of the match. Just go and watch it yourself if you haven't already. Banks wins the belt. It's her first singles title win on pay-per-view since like SummerSlam 2017, which seems mental. She is now a Women's Grand Slam champion in WWE as well. She's held the SmackDown belt now, of course, the Raw Women's Championship like 70 times with no successful defenses, the NXT Women's Championship, and the Women's Tag Team Championship. So she's doing very well for herself at the moment. Someone else who's doing very well for himself at the moment is Randall Keith Orton. Favorite, of course, of our editor, Ben Roy Turner. He is now a 14-time WWE World Champion, in WWE. He won the WWE Championship off of Drew McIntyre last night. They had another long Hell in a Cell match. Drew went off the side of the cell, through the table, all of that stuff. Big spots. They fought on top of the cell as well, because but Randy ended up taking the victory. 14-time World Champion. Interesting thing about this, or maybe not interesting if you're not too concerned about this feud continuing, is that they had a big stare down after the bell as well. So it looks like that might be continuing going forward. Randy Orton winning the belt against Drew at the 3rd time of asking. He's previously lost, of course, at SummerSlam and Clash Champions. So yeah, I mean, in the other title matches, you got Slapjack fighting for the US title. Okay, there was a 24/7 thing on the kickoff show with R-Truth and Drew Gulak as well. And Roman Reigns successfully defending his belt against Jey Uso. But yes, Adam Cleary, title defenses, changes.
I can't believe you've done that. I was sat here all ready to bring out some really interesting points about what the Sasha Bayley feud can do going forward, about how they can actually get some life out of some Randy Orton title defenses. And you've just thrown Slapjack at me right as I was getting set to pounce with that. So, no, my head's now just full of T-Bar and Burial Jobs and Ali and Slapjack and Nose Gear or whatever they're all called. So, yeah, a really good show. I would recommend highly you go watch Sasha Banks versus Bayley. And, I mean, if you're a WWE historian, I'm sure there's something in Drew versus Randy Orton. But what I will say is, while the Randy Orton title change might seem underwhelming to you, a normal person, just think how good it's going to be when Drew gets that back in front of a crowd. Maybe?
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Anyway, one person who didn't have their fingers crossed, or certainly had no takesy-backsies, in effect, I nearly had a link there, was Otis, who lost his Money in the Bank contract. Now, I have seen some spectacular reversals of fortune in my time, but to go from being the current incumbent of the Money in the Bank briefcase to feuding with Tucker in the space of 30 seconds takes some doing. There's been so many questions ever since Otis won the Money in the Bank contract at the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. How on earth would they come up with a workable storyline where he either cashed in on The Fiend, or on Braun Strowman, or on Roman Reigns, or on Drew? And it never seemed to quite make sense. And this apparently was not by design. This was just because it never made sense. And WWE have cut their losses on it by having The Miz go and take that off him. Now, when you sat there wondering what this beautiful white glowing light is behind you, this is, of course, because WhatCulture always has precedent in these things. The same way as with Trump, there's always a tweet. With us, there's always a video. Why The Miz should win the WWE Money in the Bank, dated when, Andy Murray? May 2018. So I'm taking some credit for this, if not a whole lot of it. Now, one interesting wrinkle in this, as I've just read in the story, was that this is the building where The Miz cashed in for the first time in 2010. So that's nice, I guess. I mean, he's a far more credible cash in, as he's got that whole, he's good with the prop, but he's a far more sneaky, devious heel, which the Money in the Bank briefcase always tends to favour. But is he going to cash in on Randy? I don't think so. Is he going to cash in on Roman Reigns? I don't think so. They've just changed one set of problems for another for me.
Yeah, it's an interesting one how we've got a question to this effect actually in a little while, but you've got a heel chasing two heels. It's kind of a weird one, but the Otis thing, I've said this a few times on video, and a lot of people disagree with this. That's fine. We're allowed to disagree about things. I thought it became quite clear after maybe 2 or 3 weeks that putting the briefcase on Otis was a huge mistake. I don't think you should have the comedy novelty haha guy chasing your world championship. We got some fun stuff out of it. I like the lunchbox. That was cool. The courtroom segments were kind of goofy and fun as well. But I do think it was time to move on from the Otis project. But with The Miz, I don't know. Let's see how it pans out. The Miz is a really talented guy. I'm sure he'll find a way to make it work.
Yeah, I hope so. I like that
Hope
guy.
so. Yeah, fingers crossed. But speaking of the cash-in, it might come on tonight's episode of Raw. Or
What?
It might not. Or it might not, because The Miz is a wrestler and wrestlers are always working. But The Miz was interviewed after taking the Money in the Bank briefcase from Otis. And he talked about the symmetry of him cashing in on Randy Orton in 2010 in the Amway Center and said, to close, who knows where we'll cash in? Could be tomorrow on Monday Night Raw. So it's something to look out for, I guess. Cashing in on Randy. Randy Orton's pretty much a bulletproof guy in WWE. I don't think it would really hurt him, or it wouldn't really matter if he lost the World Championship a day later. The guy's had it 13 times already, He's done all right for himself. Randy Orton has a pretty good career behind him at this stage. But maybe that would be a tool to have Randy Orton and then lose it and then win it back at some point so he can get closer to the record of 16 co-held by John Cena and Ric Flair. Can't think of many people who would really want that, but it might happen. I'm kind of running out of steam on this point, Adam Cleary. Save me.
What I'm going to do, Andy, is this is a very interesting news story. It's a very interesting thing that The Miz has done and a very interesting circumstance it has created. However, I'm just going to file this one under that man knows exactly what he's doing. If he's tweeting that he's going to cash in his Money in the Bank briefcase, there is absolutely next to no chance he is actually going to do that, because the whole USP of the Money in the Bank briefcase is that it can happen anytime out of nowhere and should be a surprise. If you telegraph it on Twitter hours before the show, you are an idiot. And if there's one thing we can say about The Miz, Andy Murray, and then he said if one thing we can say about the Midiot there, it's that The Miz is not an idiot. As we've clearly discussed in why The Miz should win the Money in the Bank briefcase, dated WhatCulture May 2018. He's just such a natural holder for it and can get a lot of mileage out of being the person holding that. However, if I asked you, gun to your head, how long do you think it is until the next Money in the Bank pay-per-view?
2 weeks on the current climate.
Because it's not as long away as you think it is, so they're going to have to do something with it towards the end of this year, if not right at the start of the next, and that gives you just a couple of months to play around with it. But speaking of filing things under knows exactly what he's doing, as I put one in, I'm going to take one out. A WWE legend has had top secret meetings with Vince McMahon, so top secret he's allowed a member of the British wrestling press to just casually tweet about it. That is right, Mick Foley, Cactus Jack, Mankind, Dude Love, your pal and mine, last seen in WWE, unveiling the 24/7 championship. Yes, that was the last time you saw him. Has apparently had some secret meetings with Vince McMahon about discussing a return to WWE, according to a tweet from TalkSport's Alex McCarthy. I shall read it verbatim to you now. Mick Foley told me yesterday that he met with Vince McMahon just a few weeks ago for a top secret meeting, and details will follow soon. Now, one of two things is true here. Either Mick Foley is now furious with Alex McCarthy for letting slip the top secret plans, or this is something that is not exactly a closely guarded secret and they are quite happy to have out there to build some anticipation for a possible return to WWE. And Andy Murray, let me tell you, I would welcome a Mick Foley return.
Yeah, I think it'll just be a cool, nice thing that Mick's really jazzed up about and so forth. The interesting thing about Mick and the timing of all this is that the story came out a couple of days ago, but WWE has used Mick quite extensively in the past to build to Hell in a Cell and say, this match changed my career and I fell off the top of it. Damn you, the Undertaker. But now we're in the aftermath of Hell in a Cell, so I wonder if maybe they'll use him who knows? Maybe he'll be on Raw. Maybe he'll show up and go, "You guys have changed because you're." That's a terrible Mick Foley impression.
Do you reckon there's any chance, Andy Murray, that he's contractually obliged to appear around Hell in a Cell, and it just got to the night of the show and someone went, "What do we do with Foley this year?" And somebody in production went, "Oh,
bollocks!
Oh,
So
I have to make a phone call."
So confirmed tonight he will be having a Hell in a Cell match on Raw.
That's what I got from that.
Let's move over to the questions today. We've got the first one here from Afit Rahim MR. Apologies if I mispronounced your name there, sir. Who asks, with Roman now the de facto tribal chief, will this lead to the dream match with The Rock, possibly for the Royal Rumble or WrestleMania, to end the Bloodline storyline, ditch Paul Heyman and turn babyface again? I don't know about turning babyface again. Maybe at the end of all this, WWE has proven with guys like Daniel Bryan that if you want to turn someone babyface, long run, turn them heel first. Kind of works. But I don't know if that's where this is headed. I do, however, think that WWE's ideal end goal is The Rock. I think that'd be phenomenal. It's like, you talk printing money and leaving money on the table and all this stuff. Come on, man, it's a no-brainer. Although we do have to mention, of course, the excessive amounts of red tape, insurance, Hollywood stuff. There's a lot of barriers to cross before we get to that match, but I could see them trying at least to put it together.
I could absolutely see that. I got the fear there for a moment, Andy, because almost word for word, I got a very similar tweet this morning, which didn't ask if it was going to be The Rock. It asked if it was going to be Rikishi, and I was like, oh God, please don't ask me that one. I have not got the insightful commentary to give you on whether or not The Rock should lead to a match with Rikishi. So yeah, I think this is obviously, as you say, it's money on the table, and we know that WWE want to do it for a very, very long time. So yes, I'm just going to say yes, they should do that.
Yeah, hell yeah, why not? Next question here is from Big Joe 83. He's not Small Joe, he's Big Joe, who asks, I was surprised Randy Orton won, as I thought Drew McIntyre would retain and The Miz cash in on him last night instead. Do you think Randy Orton's reign is going to be a long one, or can you see there being a number of title changes to get him nearer to the Flair-Cena record? My answer to that is very simple. I think that they're going to do him versus Edge for the belt. I think Edge is going to win the belt from Randy Orton in this title reign, but Edge's injury recovery is not going as well as planned. So I do think it's going to be a long reign. Maybe WrestleMania, maybe after that. Depends when Edge is ready. I hope they don't do the record thing because it's so contrived.
I tell you what, it's going to become Survivor Series, Andy Murray. Not a long reign, a Roman reign. Woo! Yeah, that's about all I've got for that one. Obviously, the title match with Edge would be a dream finale to this incredibly convoluted feud. I mean, obviously, they came back at the Royal Rumble. Nobody knew how things were going to turn out. Nobody knew how just off the rails the world and pro wrestling was going to go. So, yes, it would be nice to get some kind of closure, hopefully in front of a large crowd at WrestleMania. But as the clock ticks down towards that, I don't think any of us are holding our breath. So if they could just do the best they can with it, I'd settle for that.
Yeah, it's a simple instruction to WWE, make it good. Final question today comes from Mark Smith, who asks, so with two heel champions and the heel holding Money in the Bank, what did WWE do now? Surely a comedic fail from Otis would have been better. If they were going to do the Otis cash-in attempt, I think a comedic fail would have probably been the best thing for my tastes, personally. Yeah,
but it's Otis. I don't want to see him comedically fail, is the thing.
He's lovely.
The comedic fail thing was brilliant for Baron Corbin because you did kind of want to see him comedically fail. If you do a comedy slapstick pratfall for Otis, let's say he tries to cash in, he falls over, and a load of just brisket comes out of the briefcase instead of a contract. Yeah, that's funny, but what's the redemption for it? How do we make that okay? How do we make that make sense for him? Has he eaten it? Is that the joke?
Does he need a redemption for? He's kind of like a novelty act. I don't know. For the Miz run here, it's going to be really interesting. I wonder if maybe they'll do a feud with him and John Morrison now. John Morrison might get jealous or something. It's kind of a hard one to forecast, which is a good thing, right? It's a good thing because usually in WWE, you see the story beats coming a mile off, and a lot of the time you just sit there and go, oh yeah, I expected that to happen. But with The Miz, this is weird and it's kind of interesting. So who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe you'll cash in on, I don't know, Karrion Kross, who doesn't have a belt. That would be weird.
All I'll say is, even if it takes 2.5 years, it's nice to be right.
Yeah, there you go. 2.5 years in the goddamn making. Better long-term booking than
I was going to say, who says WhatCulture can't do long-term storytelling? I'm damn ahead blonde after this.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Things you can podcast. This is a podcast on stuff. You can follow us on Twitter at WhatCulture WWE. You can find Adam Cleary on Twitter at
Adam Cleary, Clery.
You can find me on Twitter at Andy H. Murray. The H today stands for Happy Birthday Taka Michinoku. Remember that time he was thrown out of the 2000 Royal Rumble and landed right on his face, and it was poor Taka Michinoku is what I'm saying. Bye.
Farewell.